Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Roundup with Mujeeb Kazi, Roundup Dallas with Mujeeb Kazi, from the studio of Dallas Fort Worth I-95 TV channel. I am honored to have a very special guest today with us who is running for the race of mayor for City of Keller, a very energetic individual who is deeply committed to serving the communities, to his family, not only in City of Keller, but the state of Texas. He is an attorney by trade, but obviously I cannot do the justice to his introduction. So let me welcome Armin Mizani to the show and have him introduce himself and see why is he running for the City of Keller's mayorship race.
Thank you, Mujeeb, and thanks for having me on the show. Bottom line for me, one of the reasons why I'm running for mayor is because I've got a family. I've got a 6 and a 3-year-old, and like many people that came to our city, we came here because of our great schools. We came here because of the great amenities that are provided, the trails, the parks, and it's just a great community. Mujeeb, you and I have always called Keller the jewel of Tarrant County, and there's a lot of reason behind that. And so ultimately, one of the reasons that I've decided to run for mayor is because I have a stake in the future of the city. You know, I have a vested interest in making sure that we do well, and not just next year and the year after that, but what's Keller going to be about 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and making sure that we articulate a vision that is forward-looking, that is inclusive, that also takes into account everything that is happening around Keller. And ultimately, for me, that's really why I wanted to enter this race, and why I will be humbled to hopefully earn the support and the trust of our residents.
How the race is going so far? I know you were in the runoff and the early voting has concluded. Election day is Tuesday. So how the momentum has been? What are the vibes?
No, I mean, the feedback is great. You know, we're out there campaigning and meeting with neighbors and talking about the issues that matter most to them. And yeah, we were very fortunate in the general election. We took about 47% of the vote in a 3-person race. And you know, in Texas and the city of Keller, you have to get to over 50, which is why we have this runoff election. And the way that I view this, honestly, Mujeeb, it's an opportunity for me to continue to meet with residents and talk about the issues that matter most to them. And the feedback has been great. And the biggest thing is we just got to get people to come back out to vote. You know, we've got the holidays right around the corner. People are busy. And I understand, you know, people are tired because we just voted in a general presidential election. But coming back to vote, especially here at the local level, I believe that local government, the government closest to the people, should be the most responsive to the people. And so it's a very important election. And you know, I look forward to hopefully being able to represent our city. And I think a lot of people are still enthusiastic about the fact that they can have a stake in this race.
Oh, well, very good. I have seen you, going out and meeting with the people, and the response that we have been getting from the families and from the neighbors and the business owners. One of the things that they have been very admiring of it is that you have been very accessible to them. Will that change once you are in the office?
No, I mean, bottom line for me, if you run for public office, you're here to serve your community. And you can't serve your community without being accessible and being approachable. And that's one of the things that when I was on the city council from 2014 to 2018, that was something that I really enjoyed, was just meeting with people. It's one of the reasons why I knock on doors, because I want to hear from you. And that to me is why I'm running. As mayor, I want, an open door policy. If Mujeeb Kazi has a question or wants to talk to the mayor, he should be able to talk to the mayor and talk about the issues that are affecting him. And absolutely, we're going to continue to do that. And to me, that is why people should, at any point, if they want to run for public office, that should be, one of the reasons why you do it, just to engage our community and have that conversation.
You're a man of an action, and I have seen you doing it. I was so pleased to see you authored a bill in 2014 when you were in the council to reduce the property taxes for our citizens. My question is that what is your end goal, and how much, what would be the, once you are in the office, how are you going to help the citizen to lower the property taxes? Because that is one of the things that has not only, burdened our citizen in the city of Keller, but it's continuously growing up. The property taxes are going up, and And the people who have actually, let me make it a two-part question. First one is that how would you help people, citizen of Keller, to reduce the property taxes? And secondly, those citizens whose kids have already grown out of high schools, they're not getting the fruits of the our school system that we have. Is there anything that you have in plan in your manifesto where that you can help them, somewhere, some sort of a reduction property taxes on their portion of the property taxes?
Yeah, I think to address your question, the first part, that absolutely. There's a lot of people right now, especially with COVID, that are being priced out of their homes. If you're in a fixed income or if you're retired, a lot of people are struggling. And as appraisals continue to go up, people are paying more in taxes. And so one of the things, as you highlighted, when I was on the city council in 2014, when I was campaigning, I was talking about a homestead exemption, something that one of our residents in Keller brought up to me when I was knocking on their door. Keller, for about 30 years, we were frozen at a 1% homestead exemption for over 30 years. When I got on council, something I wanted to do was introduce the first increase ever to that homestead exemption. And believe it or not, Mujeeb, it took about a year for us to get that through, but we finally did. And because of those efforts, now Keller recognizes a 14% homestead exemption. So what that means is every year that your property gets valued, you deduct 14% of that, and that is the new taxable value for the city of Keller's purpose. And as mayor, one thing that I want to do is I want to make sure we get to 20%. That is the state max, the max that the state of Texas will allow us to do. That's going to help you as a homeowner. Now you can deduct that 20%, and it's going to help a lot of people. And also, I think what's in correlation to all that is we as a city have to start bringing quality restaurants and retail to the area. A lot of people in Keller sometimes, we're guilty. We go to some surrounding cities and we shop over there, or we go and eat. It's the more we can do to incentivize folks to stay in Keller, to shop local, that's going to actually help us as well as homeowners, because it's going to shift the burden away from property taxes, and we can do some more dependency on the sales tax revenue that's generated. So it goes hand in hand, economic development and making sure we increase the homestead exemption. And for a lot of people that whether they don't have children in the school system anymore, or maybe they never had kids, but they live in Keller and they're paying the Keller ISD taxes. One of the things that I've talked about is I think it's incumbent on the mayor and city council to have conversations with all the other taxing entities, including Keller ISD, including Tarrant County, including the hospital district, because when we do that, if we're lowering our rate as a city, as long as they're doing their end too, then that is ultimately how you see some real relief. And so it's definitely incumbent for us as a mayor and council to have those conversations and make sure that everybody's doing their part.
Excellent. You mentioned about the quality development. One of the things that we see in our city is that we are pretty much a landlocked city where we have a lot of traffic coming in and going out from the neighboring cities. Uh-huh. Some of the intersections are overcrowded. Have you ever thought about what are you going to do about those traffic congestions, especially those families who are living around those traffic lights? I can give you several examples, such as 377 in North Tarrant. Those families, once you have those cars during the rush hours parked there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they're burning fumes, that is unhealthy for the families and for the businesses. And it's going to get worse actually in the next 15, 20 years, unless it's taken care of it. So have you ever thought about that? And if not, then what are you suggesting? How do we handle that? I know we have several cities involved, the state involved, several authorities are involved, but at some point of time, we all need to take some sort of an initiative to get the ball rolling on that issue.
Yeah, and you're right. And here's the reality. In Texas, we have about 1,000 people moving to the state each and every day. And to the DFW area, that's over 300 people alone. So, you look at Keller and you look at some of the growth that's happening. For example, in Westlake, you've got Charles Schwab that's moving, their headquarters out here to Westlake. That's going to have an immediate impact on our Keller roads and even our Keller schools and things like that. And so ultimately for me, we have to have a long-term plan, a 5, 10, 15-year plan that takes into account a lot of the growth that's happening around us. One of the things that we can do is, we have relationships with, for example, Commissioner Gary Fickus is down in the County Commissioner's Court. He oversees a lot of the transportation, projects for the state here in our area. And so being able to have a strong relationship with him is going to be beneficial and helpful. In fact, some of our predecessors, Pat McGrail, had a good relationship with him, and so do I. And so making sure we continue to do that, because ultimately it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between the city and the state and the county. And for example, 377 that you mentioned, that's a state, that's a TxDOT. That's a TxDOT road. So being able to collaborate with the other entities and making sure we make those improvements is essential. The other, second half of that, to Mujeeb, on that question is, we have an $86 million budget, approximately, each and every year here in the city of Keller. And ultimately, it's a matter of priority. Where do we want to prioritize our infrastructure improvements? And I'm someone that believes, government's there to help out, as far as what the core functions. The core functions to me, infrastructure, public safety. Those are the essential functions of local government. And so it's a matter of prioritization and how do we, from an $86 million budget, where do we put our streets and our sidewalks? Where do we put our roads? And to me, that's at the very top of the list, along with public safety, making sure we have a safe community. But it's just a matter of prioritization. And just like you do in your own home with your own budget, we got to treat government the same way. We got to be fiscally responsible and ultimately make decisions that we believe will have a longer effect. And a very good example of that, Mujeeb, would be if you look at areas of Keller, for example, Old Town Keller. A lot of the businesses in Old Town Keller were hurting, and some of them are still hurting, partly because they don't have the infrastructure in place. They don't have enough parking. They don't have enough, accessibility for pedestrians, things like that. When you make those improvements as a city and as a community, you're also inadvertently helping a lot of the small business owners and helping them succeed. And when they succeed, we succeed as well. So it's a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of different aspects to it. And ultimately, it's a matter of where do you prioritize infrastructure. And for me, it's very high.
No, I'm glad that you gave the answer in the length, because people wanted to hear that. And one of the issue that I want you to touch upon before I move on to my next segment is that what are your take? I know that this issue has been pretty much talked about, especially during the election time when we were there at the early voting period, about the high density development and the apartments. Can you elaborate on that, your point of view? Because there is a misconception about that, especially about your campaign, that you in line with the an ambiguous stance on those high density developments. So please elaborate for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality. A lot of the, for example, the apartment complexes that you see around Keller. There was one that was recently approved about 6-8 months ago. The truth is, I wasn't even on the city council at the time. I served on city council from 2014 to 2018. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes what happens in politics is you see a lot of misconceptions and or half truths. And my father always told me a half truth is nothing but a whole lie. Mm-hmm. And so I'll tell you this, Mujeeb. Ultimately, for me, I'm someone that values quality over quantity. We're a city of about 46,000 people. Our build out is estimated to be close to 50. And to me, it doesn't mean we get there overnight. I think it has to be a slow and incremental approach that stresses quality. And a lot of the reasons why people came to Keller, prior, like my family, as I mentioned earlier, it's the fact that we have great schools, but that we also have, our trails and our parks. We have a very unique character in the city of Keller. And for me, I'm someone that values that. And so I don't want to see us, change who we are as a community, which is, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of people came here. So ultimately, with any development, we've got to stress quality over quantity. And anytime something comes up, like, as you mentioned, whether it be a residential or even a commercial development, I think it is incumbent on the mayor and city council to bring our residents, bring in the developer, whatever that may do, whoever they may be, and let's ask questions. Let's have town hall forums. Let's have idea raisers. And ultimately, when we engage as a community and ask the hard questions, ultimately that is how you come with a good project for the city. And if at the end of the day we cannot reach an agreement, our role is to represent the will of the people, period. And if the will of people are not for a particular project, and we don't think that project's going to be beneficial for the city long term, then you vote against it. But I think sometimes in politics, people make things too confusing and they make things all convoluted. And ultimately, it's about being pragmatic and remembering what you came to the city of Keller for. And for us, it's preserving that character. We have areas that are a little bit more dense. We have other areas that are less dense. And I think that is what makes us special. And yeah, I want to make sure that we continue to preserve that.
Excellent. The next question that I would like to ask is that as mayor of as new elect mayor for the city of Kellers, what is your, because we all talked about programs, having programs for the senior citizen, quality development, reducing the property taxes. One of the things that I was surprised that not very many candidates talked about was the how with the COVID-19 impacting our communities and businesses, our youth is not half of it, but most of it is out of school because they're learning from home. And our having a great parks and recreation and the sports as facilities for our youth can give them an alternative, just not being always glued to the technologies. There are some certain sports that we would like our city of Kellers to have, such as a game of cricket. We have soccer and other games. Have you given any thought on that so we can accommodate those who have not been given the opportunity to play the sports of their liking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually met with board members of the Keller Youth Association, and we've talked about some of the things that we can do and to improve the sports park here in Keller. Keller, I believe, one of the strongest suits of Keller is the fact that we're a very family-centric town. Whether you have kids or whether you don't have kids, it's still a very family-centric community. And making sure that we are working with the Keller Youth Association, working with other entities to improve our sports park, to me, it's one of the areas of focus. If I happen to get in, I want to make sure we continue to look at, because you look at some of the surrounding communities and look at how they've prioritized their youth, and it's had a direct effect on our community. And it's have a positive impact. You look at communities like South Lake or Bicentennial Park. They put a lot of focus into that area of their community, and I think it's proved to be very beneficial. So the same thing with Keller, and I have had those discussions with the president of Keller Youth Association and some of their board members, and ultimately, we as a city, we've had plans before in the past that frankly have been kind of set aside. With regards to improving our sports park and improving those amenities. And for me, it's an area of focus. And I think as someone who has two kids, a 6 and a 3-year-old, who are just getting into sports as well, I think it's beneficial to kind of have someone that has that type of perspective and that understands that there's a lot of value in our youth sports. And as you mentioned, Mujeeb, especially with COVID, a lot of people sometimes are staying home and doing those type of things. And so to be able to offer an avenue for folks to do it in a safe manner and be out there and interact with their, colleagues and friends and things like that, and have an amenity for us to do that, I think it's going to be very critical for us moving forward.
Great. We are into the last few minutes, and I'm just going to digress a little bit from the local politics and national level. I know you're Republicans, and our party, our president has lost the election. How would that impact us as Texan?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a Republican, and yeah, ultimately, I believe the policies that I support, unfortunately, in this presidential cycle, it didn't pan out the way that maybe I was expecting it to be. But ultimately, I will tell you this: at a local level, that's why I think it's so important for us to elect people who are accessible. And I believe all politics is local. And as I mentioned earlier, the government closest to you should be the most responsive to you. And that's why you see what happens on a national scale. I think sometimes people forget that you can't just depend on the state and federal government to do things for you. Sometimes it's, your neighbor that has, the best reach, and your mayor and council. And so that's why, to me, it's one of the reasons why I ran for this seat, is that, the things that impact us right away, that I think have the most impact. For example, economic development, our taxes, our streets, our sidewalks. If you got a pothole, I tell people if I'm elected and you have a sidewalk that needs to be repaired, I'm not going to knock on your door and ask, hey, are you Republican or are you Democrat? Did you vote for me or did you vote for my opponent? It shouldn't be that way.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, one of the beautiful things about local politics, I guess, is that ultimately you're here to represent all 46,000 residents, regardless of your party affiliation. And as mayor and frankly, as council, when I was on the city council, that's what I did. And as mayor, that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Excellent. The last question that I'm going to ask you that I think, I'm deeply rooted to the state of Kashmir that has been facing the human rights violation, particularly for the last 1 year and a half. Not sure if you have ever looked at the human rights violation in Kashmir that is taking place. The over 8 million people have been under the lockdown for the last almost a year. It's one of the biggest open jail, basically, there where human rights violations are beyond anybody's humans' imaginations. Do you know anything about Kashmir? If not, then I want you to look it up, man. It's a very grave concern for the lot of. Basically, if you were in my shoes, I consider this one as a bone of contention of a nuclear flashpoint for the world, not just for that region.
Sure, and I'll tell you, Mujeeb, I don't know too much as far as the history and some of the conflicts that are happening in Kashmir. The extent of my knowledge is, really in our conversations that you and I have had, and I can just tell you this from a very broad perspective. Anytime there are human rights, violations, to me that's a grave concern, and it doesn't matter who you are, frankly. Ultimately, when you see some of the things that are happening around the world, I think it's incumbent on folks like yourself, who are leaders within your community, to have conversations with people who may have a direct impact. For example, if I happen to get elected mayor, there are residents that live in Keller that maybe are such as yourself, who are from that area, from that region, and from Kashmir. And ultimately, as I mentioned in the prior question, I'm here to represent you as well. And so having those conversations and becoming educated on those type of issues and if need be, talking to folks in Congress or talking to folks in the state legislature and making sure that they're doing what they can, whether it be resolutions or things like that. Ultimately, I think that is something that when you elect a leader, they're there to represent you. And so for me, even though I'm not 100% knowledgeable on the issue, I can just tell you if there are human rights violations, as you've indicated to me, and it sounds like there are, then we need to have those conversations. And I look forward to, bringing you alongside and making sure that we can do everything we can to, hopefully address the issue, or at least encourage people that can address the issue directly.
Great. We are into the closing last 1 minute, and I will leave it up to you to not only round up the entire campaign and encourage people to come out and vote on Tuesday. And if you have any message for the Keller resident and to that regard to the, our audience at the global stage.
Yeah, no, first of all, again, thank you again for having me here. And Mujeeb, the message I would tell people is, participate. If you live in Keller, vote. This is your community. You came here for a reason, and making sure that we preserve that is very important. If you don't live in Keller, it's the same message. Wherever you may be in the world, you have to participate. You have to be active. And I think to me that's one of those foundational rights that we have as humans, is to be able to vote and to be able to have a say in the electoral process. And so that's my biggest piece of advice, and my biggest, my hope is that people stay active, stay engaged, because ultimately you see some of the things and maybe some of the injustices that we see around the world. And if we stay quiet, if we stay silent, nothing positive is going to come out of that. And so we have to remain vigilant. We have to, be vocal about issues, and ultimately your voice, your vote is your voice. And that's why that'll probably be my last message to everybody that may be watching this, wherever they may be.
Thank you, Armin. And it was great having you on our show. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today. Until next time, take care of yourself.